I am delighted today to tell my story in my own way. My name is Cynthia Pratt. Well, I'm really Cynthia Moxie Pratt, but they call me Cynthia Mother Pratt. And if I'm asked, what's your name? I can't afford to leave mother out because they won't know who I'm talking about. That's how much they've accepted the name mother. I was born in New Providence, of course. My parents, my mother is from Eleuthera, Bluff Eleuthera. My father is from Mangrove Key, Andros. We had, she had 16 children, and I'm the 13th child. We lived on West and South Streets, that is known today as Bain Town, a part of Bain Town. My life has been one that's simple, and growing up in a community where we had very little, we were taught early how to survive. My parents, my father, and my mother were illiterate, couldn't read, couldn't write. The children, of course, grew up, and back in those days, you went to school, but if your parents didn't have money, you only went as far as the age of 14. And after that, you're on your own. And so during these years, I was taught how to persevere, how to not give up easily. I learned how to find things. If you didn't have mommy, you look and find Grammy, so to speak. We weren't complaining because there was no reason to complain because there was nothing coming. So you had to go out and survive. My mother was a straw vendor. My father was a janitor. During those years, my mother would take us in the straw market. I was but a little girl. And we would remain in the market until the wee hours of the morning. And the reason for that was that because the ships came in, and at that time we didn't have a harbor. So when tide was high, the ships were able to come in to dock. When tide was low, they had to stay where we call over the bar. That's quite a ways out. And the smaller boats called the tender would bring the tourists in. So my mother would stay out to wait for that hour of the morning because normally the tourists would come in and walk the streets. And that was the best time for her to make $1. And so here we were, little children out in the straw market around 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. And I'm chasing behind tourists, singing for them. And there was a little song that I sang called, "Before you leave in New York, you had a wonderful talk, but little Nassau." And they would listen to me, and some would chase me away, of course. And some would give me a nickel, some would give a quarter. And back then, a quarter was plenty money. That was 1 shilling and 99 cents. I tell you, we were so excited once you got a quarter, 1 and 9 pence, we call it, because that was lunch money for the next day. My father, of course, as I said, he was a fisherman and a janitor. He would come out to the docks and, of course, I guess, hustle as much as he can. But he would work with the school we called Western Senior School. He was there as a night janitor. And so during the day, he would just try to make ends meet out in the market, the vegetable market, and the docks were out there. And of course, at that time, the Haitian sloops used to come in with a lot of mangoes, And they would always dispense the ones who would they want, and those they didn't want, they would separate them. And I remember one day we went down to the docks and there was no food. And so there's no need to cry about there's no food because there's none coming. What do you have to do? We have to go and find food somewhere or another. So I learned how to fish. We would take the straight pin and bend it like a hook. And we would go down by the docks and look for what you call conch, the bait, and put on that and get the thread, the number 10 thread, and tie it on to the pin and make that a fishing line. And once we would have done that, we throw that in the water, and sometimes we caught a fish, and we would make a little fire with 3 stones, and we would fry that same fish over the fire. That was a meal. Then we would go down by the docks, and there were these mangoes that they threw overboard because they began to rot. And we would take them out of the water, cut out the part that seemed to be corroded, and we'd sit down and eat. That was a meal. And so back then, we learned early how to survive, early. Miss Moxie, as my mother was called, she was always looked down upon by the other vendors because she had so many children, and we weren't the best of looking children, and they would call us names because we were poor, and sometimes we weren't as clean. And I can remember her one day standing, and she didn't make a dime that day. And here she has to feed all these children. She had 13 sons and 3 daughters, and I'm supposed to be the 13th child. And so I remember the day when this gentleman came down from Andros, one of the islands, and they would bring their straw in. And this is where they would make their money for the family islands. And the vendors would purchase the straw to make their bags and their house and their hats. But this particular day, my mother said to this gentleman, and I was but a toddler, but I never forgot this. And she said, "Credit me the straw," this was during the morning, "and come back to me in the afternoon, I will pay you." But that particular day, my mother didn't make a penny. And so the gentleman came back for his money. And she said, "Well, I don't have it yet." And he started to speak to my mother in such a manner. I stood there as a toddler. This is something I never forgot. And he made it seem as though my mother was dishonest. She was not dishonest. She merely was hoping that she would make a couple of dollars to pay this man by the time he returns. But she stood there and she started crying. I saw these things and it made me stronger as a child. And so, growing up back in those days were not easy, but we didn't know that we were poor. Somehow we just didn't seem to know we were poor. We went about, we were happy as a lark, but we knew how to survive if we didn't have it. Not like the children today that depends on mommy to do this and daddy to do that, and there's a McDonald's and there's a Burger King. No. We didn't have all these luxuries. But what we had was love, respect, knowing what it is to say yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. knowing that you're a child and you must act as a child, and your parents train you in a way that children did not mix with adults. Like I see the children today, they sit in a conversation with adults and they have their little input. No, 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 no. That was a no-no. Automatically, whenever anyone came around who were adults, your parents, you just automatically left. Because you knew what would come later if you didn't. And so, my life has been one that, in my opinion, one that it was tough at the time, but at the same time, it made me stronger. God has given me some gifts, athletic gifts, where I was one of the few women back then who had height, because back then women didn't grow tall. We were short, and I was tall and skinny. And so they would always tease me sometime and say, well, how's the weather up there? Because I was tall. But I had a gift of athletic gift. It was basketball. I can play any type of sport. And there was the Prairie Courts. The Prairie Courts, which is owned by the Catholic Church. And every Friday, the nuns would give us milk and cheese. You would go down and get in line for all the poor people, and they would give us milk, a bottle of milk, and this big slice of cheese. That was a meal, and you're taking that home to be shared among the family. But there were the Prairie Courts there at the same time, and I would hang around the courts playing ball with the young boys. Back in those days, there was no fear. The young men were young men. They respected you as a young lady. And because I had a skill that was better than the boys, many of them, I was better than them. But my mother was one who didn't believe that a girl should jump and run and sweat. So I got a whipping so many times because I'm out there shooting marbles, or I'm playing ball or flying a kite, something. I didn't like the housework. I didn't like sewing, and she wanted me to sew, and I don't want to sew. I don't want to learn those things. I wanted to play ball. And so my mother never really, up to her death, she never saw me perform. But Lou Adderley, who was one of the coaches back then, he saw the talent in me, and he called me and he said, would you like to play for my team? I said, yes, sir. Because the other teams didn't see me in terms of my talent. They looked at me because I didn't look right. I didn't have the proper clothes on. And so they didn't associate with me. When they spoke to me, they didn't speak with me. They spoke at me. And this man, Leviticus Adley, saw that. And he called me one day and asked me, would you like to play for my team? I said, yes, sir. And when I started to play, it was a time when they realized I did have some talent. And I won all of the awards. And I was only 10 years old at that time. And so I started winning awards from a toddler, so to speak. But my mother would be in the straw market. And our house is on West and South Street Hill. And when we say on the corner, the house was on the corner. There was no lawn, there was no grass. You stepped out of the house onto the road. That's what it meant by on the corner. And she would send me to the market sometimes to take something like a bag or a hat, because my brother would assist her in the straw market. But the problem I had is I had to pass the Prairie Courts. And so, because I had such a love for basketball, I would stop there with the straw hat, and before you know it, I would be there for hours. And when I look up at the gate, because there was a high road and the gate standing, my mother's standing to the gate shouting at me. And I said, now, Lord, I know they're going to kill me today. But of course, I got a whipping. But she saw that I had a love for something. And it was something that would keep me out of problems, would keep me out of trouble. But back then, our parents always saw girls as girls, and girls were supposed to only do certain things, and boys were supposed to do the other things. And so those days were what? There were some good days, and then there were some bad days. But when I look at my parents, particularly my mother, she was not afraid to fail. She was not afraid to fail. I remember Nurse Nichols, who lived about 4 houses down from where we lived. She was very close to my mother, and she was also a midwife. And every time my mother would have a baby, she would deliver them. And I could remember her telling me before she passed that our house was always under construction. There was always a piece of wood to nail up here and nail up there. And because there were so many children, you added on a little piece of wood and then you put a little curtain up. That's another room. And back then, they didn't really have much pressure on you for like town planning and all that kind of thing. And so, recognizing where we've come from, where we are today, we have much to be thankful for. And then there was the church. My mother would always wake me in the middle of the night. And as a child, I would wake up upset because, Mother, you woke me up. Why did you wake me up? I'm sleepy. And she would say to me, I want you to read the Bible for me, because nobody else in the house could read. I was the only one. And I would always remember these words. She said, Cynthia, he that humbleth himself shall be exalted, and he that exalts himself shall be abased. Now, I'm a child, and I don't want to hear this because I'm sleepy, and I don't know what in the world you're talking about anyhow. But as I grew, those words stayed with me. He that humbleth himself shall be exalted. That's the word of God. But when you exalt yourself, when you believe that you're all that, you'll be abased, you'll be brought down. As life began to unfold for me, I began to see these things. And I can remember people not wanting to talk with me. They always talked at me because I was full of sores, because I was malnourished. We had no food. And when I went to school, there was no shower, there was no bathroom. We had a bucket. I'll always remember we had a 5-gallon bucket. And you would fill that with water and get a piece of cloth. It wasn't no towel, piece of cloth. And you're washing yourself off. No soap, because there's none. And so I would sometimes see the flies blowing my legs. And the children would scorn me at that time. I'm talking about a girl who was a human being, but who was made to believe we were nothing. So the Moxie clan were always looked down upon. because my brother were like, when I say rebels, they'll fight behind the church pulpit if you give them a spot there. And they were divers out on the docks. That's all they can do. They had no education. And so they didn't stay in school long enough because mother couldn't feed them. And so you had to accept who you are and the conditions. It's not going to go away overnight. And so as I developed, when I turned 15, 16, of course I had to leave school at the age of 14. But I was in the A stream at Western Senior. Mr. James Smith, who was the governor of the central bank, he was our governor of the central bank. Marcus Bethel, who ended up Minister of Health. Willem A. Salke ended up a permanent secretary with the Ministry of Education with government. All of these people, of course, Harry Lockhart became head of the Privy Council, I think he was. Why am I naming these people? These were all my colleagues in the A stream. But when we turned 14, government high school at that time was private. St. John's was private. St. Augustine's at that time was only for males, and that was private. Well, you didn't look at Queen's College and St. Andrews. Those were the rich people's schools. But the others were able to go because their parents was able to pay for them to go on. In my case, I had to go the long way around. I had to go to evening classes, and I had to go to night school and all these things, and then off to college. But if you notice what God has done, God's hands have been on my life from all the way back there. Because I ended up in a place where all of my colleagues who were able to go on, we all ended up in the cabinet of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I want the nation to know it's not where you begin, it's where you end. And in spite of how things look, continue to persevere. Yes, you're going to be discouraged. Yes, they will tell you will never make it. But you must have confidence and believe that there is a God. And that God is the one that guided me and led me, because no matter what we did, we always remembered God. Because I grew up in an era where church was not an option. Church was mandatory. It was not up for debate. When Sunday came, you automatically got up. And whatever you have in terms of clothing, that's what you put on. And I can remember this day when I had these shoes, and the shoes apparently had burst at the toes, and I said, oh boy, that's good. I don't have to go to church today. So I went to my mother and I said, Mother, my shoes I can't go to church because look at my shoes. And so she said to me, go in the room and bring the machete. We call it cutlass back then. So I'm trying to figure out, what is she's gonna kill me? She said, bring that, and now go and bring my shoes in the other room. I went and I got the shoes, and she cut the heel of her shoes off. And she said, put them on. And when I put them on, the shoes, of course, the heel went one way in the toes. And she said, go to church. Well, I cried all the way to church because here I am with these shoes all twisted up on every side, but you couldn't say you weren't going to church. And so these are all experiences I'm talking about when it comes to where you've come from and where you are now. And I must tell this story because I've spoken to just about all of the high schools in New Providence and many in the Family Violence. And really this morning, it's a blessing for me to be here because I haven't been taking much invitations for speaking invitations. I've been turning down a lot of them because I figure I'm getting old now and they don't want to hear me anymore. But this particular day, my brother and I, there was nothing in the house. So there's no need to sit and cry. And I said to my brother Ed, Ed, I'm so hungry that my stomach feel like it's into my back. And he said, let's look and see what we can find. And we found a little package of rice. I'll never forget this. And I said, oh yeah, let's cook that. Well, that was just rice and water. And I said, well, Ed, let's see if we can find some tomato paste, some this to color the rice so it wouldn't be just white rice. And on the shelf was sitting a can. It said tomato paste, and we were so happy. Oh. And when we pour the paste out into the rice, all came out were roaches. They fell into the rice. And here we are, we have a decision to make. There's nothing to eat. Either we're going to pick the roach out of the rice or starve. You have to make a decision. And I sat there and I picked out the wing and picked out whatever was the roaches, and we ate that rice. Why am I saying this? I'm saying, yes, this is the girl that ate the roachy rice, who God brought to the top of the nation. And I'm saying, no matter where you are today, right now, you believe nothing is happening for you, then look at my life. Walking down Cumberland Street, crying as I go, hungry. I said, God, I'm so hungry. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And as I got by British Colonial Hotel, I'll never forget it. There's a high wall that was on the side of the hotel leading to Rosin Square, to the market. And I looked on the ground and there was a paper bag. And I opened that bag, and in that bag was a half of sandwich. I thought that Christmas had come for me. I sat down on the side of the road. I wasn't concerned whether the person eating it was sick or whether they had some kind of disease. I saw Christmas. I saw a meal. I sat there and I ate to my heart's content. Then I continued into the market. People see you today, but they don't know your story. They see the glory, but they don't know the story. Many are ashamed to tell their story. They don't want anybody to know that they had to go through these things. I believe that we're making a grave mistake because there are more of the masses in the pit today than who's out of the pit. And that is one of the reasons why I decided that I would write my book on my life. Not to inspire Bahamians alone, but the world. Because of the masses of women today who are in the pit, actually in the pit today. They need to know there is hope. There is hope. I'm not ashamed of my life story. I want to tell it because many children today are in the pit. And one thing about Bahamians, a lot of us, boy, we're great pretenders. You look at us and I'm all right, I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't had a meal for you don't know when, how long. Sleeping on the floor. But God has caused me to understand because I had to live it. I had to live it in order to know that there are so many out there. I came through it. And that's why pride ought not to be any part of my life. Tell your story. Our country is in trouble today. I truly believe that. The reason for that is that there's so much suffering, human suffering. There's not enough of us telling our story because they only see the red carpet treatment. They don't see the midnight oil that you burn. And so, in going to school, I keep saying to the children, you might be slow. You might can count, but you have to count with your fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other kid could just pop it out because they're quicker. Doesn't mean that you are worse off. The end is get it right. You might take a little longer, but the bottom line is you got it right, even the student who was able to get it quicker. You want to get to the finish line. You might be slow in getting there, but continue to press on. No matter, don't let they laugh at you. That's okay. That's okay. And so when I decided that I would go to college, it was just a miracle from God. Because here I am now, I'm a married woman with a house full of children. Where am I going to which college when we are poor as a church mouse, so to speak? And God sent a man to our house. At that time, I had returned home. But you don't understand sometimes what God has in the plan for your life. You have to figure it out after a while and you say, oh, now I understand what God was saying to me. I got the opportunity because somebody came to help me. Then shouldn't I be in position to help somebody while I'm here now? That's how I look at life. Because if someone hadn't helped me, I certainly would not have been in the position I'm in today. And so my husband, God had given me a good husband, a good home. We were poor, but we did not have the material things like that. But we had love, joy, peace. We had all those things. And we didn't have a house. We had a home. It was not a mansion, no. But we had a home where we can smile with one another, where we can show respect to one another, where we know that we are family. We did everything with our children. We did it together. And because God had given me some gifts, I played sports. My husband was my coach. My children were our support. And so whenever I went out to play, they would be in the park with me. And sometimes they're out in the outfield saying, Mommy, hit the ball out here to us. I'm batting. I'm the mother. But that is what we did for enjoyment. We went out into the western part of town and we would, on Sunday evenings, pick cocoa plum with the children, look for grapes. All of this made us a family where we were bonding together and where we didn't know what it was to speak to one another in the foul language that you hear going on today. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying that I would like to see the days come back in this country where we know what it is to respect one another. We might not agree with one another, but respect. I would like to see the houses become homes again. The problem is we have children having children. That's one of our major problems. We have 14-year-olds, 15. Some have 2 children at 16 years old. Some 24 already have about 4 children. Not married, unwed. These are the things that I believe is really tarnishing us. And this is not the Bahamas that I used to know. And so I'm saying, I might can do a little, but you can also do a little. And if we came together and tried to help as many as we can, then we know that our living would not be in vain. God had caused me to emerge into the place called the Parliament. I want to skip through because my life story is so long, you wouldn't be here. It would take too long for me to tell all of it. But when I got involved in politics, it was not until I returned home. I was given a scholarship to attend college in 1980. My husband back then was the driving force behind my decision making. I didn't know whether I really wanted to make that decision because I didn't want to gain on one end and lose on another. In other words, I'm going to school, but I have a husband and children. I don't want to lose my family and gain my degree. Which one is more important to me at that time? That's the way I saw it. My husband was the one who kept saying, Cynthia, you must go. I'm going to keep the children. You must go. I'll keep the house. And I decided I would go. And God, in His goodness, gave me some people in America who came to my aid. We had no money. We had no finances like that. I had a full scholarship, plus they gave me an honorarium at the end of each month to show you how God opened the doors. They brought me in as a coach to coach the volleyball team at that college, St. Augustine's in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I met this lady who was the athletic director for women's sports, Dr. Beverly Downing. We developed a bond. But I was also a student, a coach, but a student. And so I was sitting in classrooms with 17 and 18-year-olds. I'm 34 years of age now. And here I am in the classroom with children that I could be their mother. But nonetheless, I was determined that I would obtain my degree. Because back then, in the 80s, husbands wouldn't dream of letting their wife talk about going to school and leaving the house and I must take care of the children. That's a no-no. That's why I knew it was rare. And when I went, my husband was teased by many. Giorgio, you letting your wife go to school, and something have to be wrong with you. And you keeping children, and he would say how they would mock him. But when I returned home, that's when people began to open their eyes. I've obtained my degree now. I'm better off than I was. And then came, the doors started to open for me. I was in education. I started out in nursing in 1961. And in 78, I transferred from nursing. So I was in training there, and I ended up in the operating theater. And then I went on to education. But I'm saying all this to say, whenever you try to improve in life, you're going to have obstacles. And I had to go through many obstacles to get where I wanted to go. I needed assistance. So I was seeking for an in-service award because I couldn't afford for my salary to be discontinued. I was given that in-service award. And when I arrived home after that long period of time, to me it seemed very long, I came back in 1983. And prior to my going, the matron of Princess Margaret Hospital was very hostile to me because she had made up her mind they weren't going to release me. And when I got on duty one day, I met a message because I went to the minister myself, the Minister of Health, and I pleaded my cause. That's how determined I was to go to school. And he said to me, okay, I'll assist you. And I went off with an in-service award. But that wasn't enough for me. I knew once I get there, I would be able to open doors for others because I will get to know people who have positions that could help my people. I'm talking about Bahamians. And as I entered that institution, I started to see the system and how it works. I saw the opportunity to get as many Bahamians as possible here at this school so that they can get a college education. That is why today I feel good about my life in terms of who I helped and how many. Scores of Bahamians. They're now doctors, lawyers, engineers, chartered accountants, journalists, senior officers, principals. I can go on and on. Many Defense Force officers. But God opened a door for me. And because He opened that door for me, I continue to open it wider for Bahamians. And many of them were dirt poor. I'm talking about dirt poor. But they were brilliant. All they needed was a chance. That's all they needed. And because I had that experience, where a lady, she tried to block me as much as possible. But nonetheless, I would not give up. When I went to college, I returned home one day, I'll never forget it, on a break. I ran into this same lady in the pharmacy, and she came and said if she can ask me a question. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, what inspired you to go to college? And I looked at her and I said, ma'am, it had nothing to do with inspiration. No, ma'am, all I needed, I didn't have to be inspired. It was all about my determination to go, but I needed a chance. I was asking for a chance, which I wasn't given. And so when I got that chance, then you can see. And she was really touched by what I said to her. I only needed an opportunity. That's all I'm asking for. So I'm saying to the masses out there, don't give up. If Johnny didn't help you, go to Mary. Mary didn't help you, then maybe you'll end up to Jenny. But don't give up and say that it'll never happen for me because I'm not in the right position. I don't know the right people. My parents are no-name people. We love to say that. My parents don't have any name. Continue to press on. You'll never know that God is a way maker except you need help to find where you're going. And so I believe today that my life story is one that is unique. It's different. People have said to me over and over, Mother Pratt, you're amazing, because they tell me about all these titles. These titles don't mean anything to me. I appreciate it and I thank God for it. But tomorrow you're gone. Yeah, you have names. Yes, they give you all these accolades, but you're gone. From dust we came, to dust we will return. And so I look at all these things and I said, Father, let me be a light. I just want to be a light. Let me reach out to as many as I can. Sitting in that parliament, yes, I've been mocked. Yes, I've been ridiculed. Yes, I've been criticized. But that's all about growing up, knowing who you are and believing in whose you are. And so I'm saying this morning to those who want to hear, you don't know what plan God has for your life, but you have to keep pressing on. Because one door might close today, but two might open tomorrow. But how would you know if you become discouraged with that one door that had closed in your face? And so to my young people, particularly those who are really from very poor families, and I must recall this young lady who, she was a brilliant girl. She was in the A stream. I was teaching at that time. And I went to see her mother. When I got to the house, there was a one-room house, one room. And the house was leaning on the side. And I said to the mother, I said, I would like to take your daughter to college. I said, I have a full scholarship I can give her. Mother looked at me, she said, Mother Pratt, I don't know why you want to take her to college, because she has to come right back. So I said, why'd you say that? She said, well, you could see, we're poor. We have nothing. So she'll have to come right back once you take her. I looked at that mother and I said, listen to me. Her name was Miss Dorothy. I'll never forget it. I said, Miss Dorothy, when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. We're not there yet. Let me take her. And I took her. That girl graduated with honors in the sciences. She's back home now. She's in senior position. There was another one who came to me, said, Mother, could you write a letter for me? I said, okay, recommending me to get in law school, because I've been trying and nobody would do it for me. So I did it, and he was accepted. Walking down Shirley Street one day, he came up behind me, he said, do you remember me? He said, I'm the young man who you wrote the letter for. I'm now a lawyer. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying that because we can reach out to the rejects. People say you'll never make it. You'll never amount to anything. These are the ones who I find joy in reaching out to. Don't tell me I can't make it. You don't tell me that there's no hope. I believe in me. I believe in God. They say, but God didn't say. And so these are the things that we have to look at in life. People talk about us, yes. But you don't have to give up because they talk. They've laughed at me. The newspaper even had me in the little funny cartoon and with my Bible under my arm going to Parliament and say, she's coming to preach now. I just smiled. And every time I stood to my feet, I talked about God and the goodness of God. And he allowed me to be in this place because I'm the least among them. I'm the least among them. And I don't see myself as being as astute in many areas as they are. But you know what I see? I see the human being. I see the natural person. I saw the young man and the young woman that needs help. I see the human side of things. And I try to reach them where they are. I don't want to bring them where I am if they don't, because they can't reach. I want to reach them where they are and then bring them to me so that they know there is someone that cares. But in our country today, selfishness has taken over in a lot of ways. We have too many egos because you live in a mansion and I live in a hut. I'm less than you are. No, I'm not. My message has always been over the many years, it's not where you live. The community doesn't make you. You make the community. And this is what I say to my young people who are particularly the inner city, because they don't live in the suburbs, because they don't live in the gated community. They look down as though they're less than others. That's not so. Because what's in you is who you are. And it will come out. And so I continue to tell them, Sea Breeze, South Beach, these are different areas in our country. Old Fort Bay, Lyford Key, the Eastern Road, they were all bushes before they became what they are. Who made them what they are? The people. It's the people. Why can't we make our area what we want it to be? That's what's important to us. Don't whine and talk about what we don't have. We can do something now. Then you earn your respect. Hold your head high. I don't see yes, I still live on 6th Street, Coconut Grove. Yes, I still live in the Coconut Grove area. Yes, they call it over the hill. Yes. But who am I? I'm a Bahamian. I'm one who believes that I have something to offer to my nation. I believe that I've made an impact on the lives of countless Bahamians. But do I still live on 6th Street, the Grove? Yes. The area didn't make me. I make the area. And so I go out and I get the children, gather them. We'd walk the streets. I get garbage bags and rakes and shovels. And I said, come on, we're going to walk the street and clean them up. No, you didn't throw the paper there, but let's pick it up anyhow. Because we live here. We live here. And so when we understand that, And we take away that pride and be looking at others that they're better than you are. No man is better than you are. God designed him just like you. Today, I am really delighted to be able to tell my story and to share with the presentation of my book, From the Pit to the Palace, which really demonstrates who I am, where I am today in my giving back to my country, and sharing where I've come from so that the masses would know that same opportunity could be allotted to them. Only they must know who they are. Who am I? What is it I want out of life? How do I get there? Let me speak with some of the people who had to persevere in order to get where they are in an honest way. And so when I sit in amazement sometimes and I look at myself and wonder, how did I get in politics? I knew nothing about politics. I haven't been around it. I had no idea what politics was all about. But people were watching me because I'm an ordinary woman, the heart of the inner city. That's the name of my book previous to this one. Just before this one, I wrote one called An Ordinary Woman from the Heart of the Inner City, and followed by From the Pit to the Palace. You don't have to pretend to be anybody, but just be yourself. Do the things that you believe will impact the lives of others, not yourself, but will impact the lives of others. Knowing that if you remain humble, God could work with you. When I was called to represent my people, I'll always remember it was Sir Lyndon Pinling that came to my house and asked me about considering running for Parliament. Well, that wasn't a difficult question at all. The answer was no. I don't know anything about any politics. He said, but Mother Pratt, if we had your legacies, I'm wondering what in the world you're talking about, because I didn't see any legacy. He said that if we had your legacy, we would be more than happy. Say, because you helped people from this level, if you went to that level, how many more you can help? That's what caught my eyes. But my concern was going into politics. Number one, I'm poor as a church mouse to begin with. It requires certain things from you that I didn't have. But I decided, because my husband was the one who continued to press on me to get involved, to run just for this time. I said, well, I'll just do one. And I thought that maybe if I said to them, I said, I have to think about this. I said, you need to give me some time. And he asked me, how much time? I said, give me about 6 weeks. I figured if I said a long time, they won't return. But in 6 weeks, they were back. They said, now 6 weeks. And I decided I'll just do it once. But I want you to hear this part of my story because it's important. When I decided that I would take that opportunity, that was in 1997. And here I am with nothing to offer financially to the people, and having to run against a person who is what you call middle class, along with the assistance of others who had money. And here I am, a little ordinary woman from the heart of the inner city, How do you expect to survive? And I walked around telling the people, when it's over, I'll still be doing what I've been doing. That was my statement to all of my constituents. And that night, when the polls closed, I said to my husband, do we have enough money for one room at the hotel? My voice was gone. I had a temperature and everything. He said, yes. We're en route to the hotel that night. And when we were almost at the hotel, the phone rang, and it was my daughter. And she said, Mom, you are leading, but only by a slim margin. So I said to her, what constituencies are not in? And when she told me, I was so happy. I said, well, I believe I lost in those areas, so that means I will end up losing anyhow. That's what I wanted. By the time we got to the hotel, she called again. She said, Mommy, the press is out here looking for you. I said, for what? She said, you won. I said, no, I can't win. I said, no, Lord, I can't win. Now, immediately, I'm starting to think of my condition. I have no clothes. And I went on to talk what I didn't have. I said, Lord, I don't hardly have a decent dress on my back. I said, Lord, I can't win because you need clothes and things to go these places. And this is me now. I'm crying to my husband. And I was so depressed. I said, no, Lord, you can't let me win. And in about 2 weeks, my phone rang. People congratulating me. And here was a lady who knew me from a young child on West Street Hill. She was an executive person, and she said, Mother Pratt, she said, I'm so proud of you. She said, I want you to go to the 17th shop. We picked out 10 suits for you. Go by the 17th shop. I'll never forget that. And I went there, and I got these suits. I said, I didn't have a decent dress on my back. I want you to hear that. And then they gave me a list for shoes. Now, listen, I'm a buy one, get one half price woman. You must understand this thing. So you gave me a list to go for these Ferragamos. Now, Ferragamos is $200 a pair. And I said, no, I can't. What kind of shoes are these? I said, you don't have anything cheaper? So the gentleman said, no, ma'am, these are Ferragamos. So here am I, this poor woman with these Ferragamos on, these fancy suits. Then they got me this Gucci bag and this pearl necklace. And here I am. I mean, when Parliament opened, I'm dressed down to kill. And then they turn around and got people to teach me protocol and how to sit and all this, because I don't have a clue. I mean, I used to stretching out, And so these things are something that God had put in place for me. And he brought a lady to teach me all about how to carry my bag and how the Queen carries hers. Well, I can learn how the Queen carry. I wonder how I could carry mine. And so here I am. I had to learn all of these things. And of course, they taught me how to cross my legs and cross it at the ankle. On this particular day, I'm here with the Governor General's wife and all are sitting down. And I'm here with my leg tight together and I'm all hurting because I thought, well, why have to tie up myself? And I looked across over here. She was sitting with her leg fly up. I said, well, why is she sitting and I said, I mean, she got her leg crossed with all, all of this was learning experience for me, and having to understand what protocol is and politics and public life. You must know these things, but a lot of us don't. So we have to be taught these things. And so when I tell my story about that, people just they couldn't stop laughing because it's truth, it's real, and just be real. Then people will help you because they know you just don't know. But don't pretend to know and then you go up, then you mess up. You see what I'm saying? And so the queen carries her bag on one hand. So you can't carry your bag up here, queen, because the queen is carrying. Man, let's let the queen carry what she want to carry. I know what I want. And so when we went to London, they said, they said, Mother, we got to have tea with the Duchess. They preparing, so they sending for you. I said, no, they ain't sending for me. To tea with the Duchess. I said, are you all going? So they said, yes. I said, well, do you have your camera? You say, yeah. And I said, well, take some picture with the Duchess. I'm not going anywhere. I went to my bed. They stood there a minute. But this the Duchess. I said, so? I said, yeah, take some pictures and bring it back for me. So, so all of these things, you could talk about now because you see that the ignorance, because you just don't know. And I never got excited about anything. I don't get bent out of shape about anything, but I fight for the rights of my people. I fight for their rights. I don't want advantage taken of the poor, and I don't want laws passed that seem to just focus on the rich and famous. And what about the poor people? What about them? And so that's my fight. And so I thank God that I'm different, and I continue to be different, and I don't feel anyway ashamed of my performance and what I've done for my people in the Bahamas and abroad.